Good morning, Dawg Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. We're going to get your weekend started in style. Now, I will tell you, I am nervous again because when you look ahead to these forecasts, something I am not an expert at reading, but I am told could be bad winter weather again. So I guess batten down the hatches, with your friends at Kroger and get stocked up on the bread and the milk and everything else. Hopefully you are getting ready to do that. We are getting ready to deliver some fun football conversation for you today, including this weekend. Starting today, huge list of visitors expected on hand for Georgia. Hopefully the weather doesn't mess that up. We'll let Jeff Sentell tell us more about that. I'm also going to tell you off the top of the program today why a couple of soon-to-be Georgia Bulldogs are getting a good bit of off-season attention in a very positive way at that. We'll kick things off with that. We'll have some fun here today. Georgia obviously getting ready for a big basketball game tomorrow against Texas A&M, we hope. All of that on the way. Glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I think this is shaping up to be a very big recruiting weekend for Georgia. That may be the big story around the program here on this particular Friday. Jeff Sentell gives us more information on all that coming up in a moment. We are looking forward to it. As a lead into that, though, let me talk about the other way right now that you acquire talent. Obviously, the lifeblood of Georgia for a long time has been high school football recruiting, but it's still important to go out and get the occasional transfer. Some programs, it's more than occasional. We'll give you more on that here in a moment. But you want to supplement your roster with very good transfers, and it's interesting to see a couple of the transfers that Georgia has brought in have gotten some very positive attention here. When you look at a ranking of top transfers for college ball for 2026, for instance, we're seeing a couple of Georgia Bulldogs being mentioned here, and I wanted to highlight those two guys here for a moment. In particular, I want to start with wide receiver Isaiah Canion. I think that Canion, coming over from Georgia Tech, is a very interesting prospect for Georgia. Now, body type-wise, he's different than the breakout guy from a year ago, Zachariah Branch, but the same way that a guy like Zachariah came to Georgia, probably didn't fully maximize his potential at USC, came to Georgia, did even more in a Dogs uniform than he had done in a Trojans uniform, and now he's a very attractive NFL draft prospect. Even though it's a body type difference and a playing style difference, I think there is some hope that Isaiah Canion, who also, for various reasons, including has some injury stuff, has not maximized, and the fact that he played with a quarterback that mostly ran all the time, I think there is some thought that Isaiah Canion hasn't maximized what he was capable of doing at Georgia Tech, and now he gets to come to Georgia to see if all of that can, come to full fruition here at UGA. Georgia fans are certainly hopeful for this, but there is also, as I said before, there's pretty positive attention being paid to a guy like this. CBS Sports recently ranked their top transfer players for 2026, and Cooper Battagna, who writes this piece for CBS Sports, gave a lot of individual love to Isaiah Canion. And I think this level of offseason hype is just fun. It's one of those things that gives you a chance to say, this is what is a possibility for my team in the upcoming season. Let me read this to you. Battagna, writing for CBS Sports, ranks Isaiah Canion as the number 31 transfer for the upcoming year. He says what Georgia's getting, a true sophomore. That's the former Yellow Jacket profiles. Now, I like this now. As the ideal fit in a Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo offense that values size and strength at the X wide receiver position. He says while the production is yet to fully match the ability, Canion's physical upside, now listen to this now, Canion's physical upside is among the most intriguing of any pass catcher in this cycle. He's 6'4", 215 pounds, and he concludes by saying, don't be surprised if Canion is a name you'll start to hear more hype around this offseason. Well, we're in kind of the offseason hype business, so if this is a guy that's going to get some of that, we'll enjoy it, especially since a year ago, a guy that got some of that hype, Zachariah Branch, proved to be completely and totally worth it. So I think you take a couple of things here from what Battagna writes. It's a fit for the Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo offense. There is physical upside because of how big and strong he is, and it's the kind of thing that others are going to notice too. There will be more chatter, in other words, around Isaiah Canion as you move through the offseason. Now, we're also big believers that it is of note that Canion's really the only receiver that Georgia brings in. They lost a lot of production off last year's team, so the fact that it's only Canion coming in as a transfer wide receiver would lead you to believe that Georgia really thinks, and this is something that Terrence Edwards has talked a lot about, that Georgia really thinks that Talon Taylor and C.J. Wiley and Scovie White and Landon Roldan and London Humphreys, a lot of the wide receivers who've been here, some longer than others, but the wide receivers who've been here, they're going to have their own chance to make a name for themselves in 2026, and we certainly believe that's true. And yet it's always nice to have that supplementary piece that can add more to the overall offensive picture, and that's what we believe that Canion has a chance to provide. And as more people outside of our boundaries here, our bubble of Dawg Nation, start to notice this, the prediction from CBS is watch the hype grow around Canion for the upcoming season, which I think is pretty fun. And to be totally honest here for a moment, as far as it goes here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger, a lot of that hype around Canion's actually already started, because I remember right when Isaiah announced that he was coming to Georgia, our guy that we trust for when it comes to wide receiver evaluations and how they fit into the overall picture in college football, the only 1,000-yard receiver in Georgia's history, Terrence Edwards, was on our show right after Canion came to UGA. And you talk about hype. Terrence will tell you that he likes Isaiah Canion for Georgia even better than what has probably been the most talked about transfer in this cycle at the receiver position, Cam Coleman now going to Texas. Terrence says, listen, I like Canion even better for what Georgia wants to do. So Cooper Battagna, CBS, predicts hype going to be building for Isaiah Canion during the offseason. We say get in line for that because we already started this hype a couple of weeks ago when Terrence Edwards said this.
Yes, he's a really good receiver, really talented. I tweeted out earlier this week that I would rather have him than Cam Coleman, not just because of the talent. NIL is going to be a little different. I just think he's a complete receiver. There's still some rawness that I saw in Cam Coleman, but having a Georgia kid that stay in state, I just like to, and maybe a little bias to the Georgia kids here in the state of Georgia, but he's a receiver that I would definitely love to see in the red and black, 6'4", 215, and he can run very well. And as you've seen, his production at Tech was very high. I mean, the numbers may not show that, but the opportunities that did present to him, he took advantage of. So I'm excited about the opportunity of Isaiah Canion coming to be a Dawg.
So two things here for a moment. I think it's funny that, respected analyst Cooper Battagna, who's writing a lot of stuff, is like, hey, before this offseason is done, you may see some hype around Isaiah Canion. And on our show, we say, listen, 3 weeks ago, we had him better than Cam Coleman. So the hype has already started as it relates to that. And, of course, I'm half kidding when I say that, because what Terrence is actually saying there, and most of you get this, there's a subtext to this of the same thing we say in a now world in which college football players are compensated. Anytime you make a player evaluation, it's the ... for the price addendum that's added to that. That Isaiah Canion compared to Cam Coleman, when Terrence says, I like Canion for Georgia better than Coleman, it's not just a apples-to-apples comparison of Canion's the better receiver. It's the ... for the price. I like Isaiah Canion for Georgia more so than Cam Coleman for the price. You are getting better value, perhaps, from Canion than you are from Coleman, at least according to Terrence, and I think that's really interesting, and it could turn out to be really true. Obviously, Georgia needs that to be the case because, as we talked about, was it last Friday maybe? When you look at the returning production numbers for Georgia, going to look very good at quarterback, going to look okay at running back, going to be a little bit thin at receiver. Georgia, when the national folks start paying attention to this, they're going to realize, man, Georgia's not really bringing back a ton with its wide receiver core, so you need a guy like Canion to step in and do some big things for you. Perhaps that'll be the case. And yet, that's not the only transfer that got some attention from CBS in the write-up the other day. Another guy that got touted as among the best transfers in America for the upcoming season is Amaris Williams, the defensive end, edge rush type, former elite recruit by way of Auburn. This is another guy that if the theme here is, yeah, he didn't fully maximize potential at the old plays, but maybe he can do that at the new plays. This is definitely true for Amaris Williams because, man, he looks great on paper. The specs are exactly what you want them to be, but probably not fully realizing all that potential for an Auburn team that was good defensively, but a bit of a mess when it comes to everything else with the program overall. But nonetheless, Amaris Williams also got some love from CBS Sports. Let me read this to you. One of the top transfers in America, according to CBS. They write of Williams that he was ranked as a top 5 pass rush in the country just 2 years ago. You like those recruiting credentials. He says he never quite put it together during his time on the Plains, logging a career-high 210 snaps this past season. You saw some of those on video a moment ago against Georgia this past year. Patagna says, though, that said, his speed, athleticism, and explosiveness off the edge remain evident and give Georgia a high upside pass rushing option on the perimeter. Listen, when you mention the phrase pass rush right now, you have me at hello on that. Georgia just needs a lot more of that. Not getting after the quarterback nearly enough. A guy like Williams, who CBS tells us has the high upside to be able to do that. Boy, I hope that's the case from your lips to God's ears on all of that. And once again, this is also a name of a player that's come up in our conversations in recent weeks here on our show. If we lean on Terrence for a lot of stuff related to wide receivers, when it comes to pass rushers, edge guys, defensive ends, outside linebackers, one of the guys that we really trust on that is Davin Bellamy, who we're also fortunate enough to have us join us each week. And Davin, really unsolicited, brought this up of his own accord about how much the other day he said he likes what Amaris Williams might be able to bring to the table for Georgia. So CBS giving him love right now. Davin Bellamy on our show was giving him love a few days ago. This is what Davin said about Amaris Williams at the time.
Those are the two things that I wanted to see. I wanted to see us go get some big name guys in the transfer portal at defensive back and in the front 7, because we know that when we start getting to late in the playoffs where we are now, why is Miami playing in the championship game, right? You got ends that can go close the game out. We made a big point about Georgia of not being able to affect, the quarterback. And I even raised my hand. I said, I made a lot of excuses. Sacks are, NFL stat, and this team is getting better. They're affecting the quarterback and not getting sacks. Well, when you do get sacks, it makes the whole team job a lot easier. So I think when we start getting to this late seasons, especially, coming into next year, how can the Dogs do better at closing the season out? You do better that with 5-star guys on the edge who at any given moment in a playoff game can change the momentum and the swing of a game with a great pass rush. So I applaud Georgia on what they're doing, in the transfer portal.
In that same interview, he went on to talk about Amaris Williams by name, about how much he likes what he brings to the table and what Georgia might be able to do there. So there you have it. You have Canion and Williams not ranked as among the best transfers, but two guys – when I say top 5, top 10 necessarily, but on that list of the most impactful transfers for the upcoming season. That is very good news, of course, for Georgia. And yet, there's also, I think, an important add-on to this discussion, too, which is while if you're Georgia, you love having Isaiah Canion and the hype that he's already getting, and Amaris Williams and the promise that he might show, it's also worth noting that when you see a lot of these lists coming out and a lot of the hard data that's put on display, it is once again evident that Georgia is just putting its roster together in a completely different way than some programs are. Because while you're glad to have Canion, you're hopeful about what Williams is able to do for you, it is still true that Georgia is just nowhere near as transfer reliant as some of its competition is. And on the one hand, you say that's a good thing. That means we got the stability on our roster right now. And you might be right. But on the other hand, you saw teams that were reliant on transfers a year ago also play deeper into the playoff than Georgia did. For instance, different ranking, different website, ESPN looks at their top transfer classes for the 2026 season. Georgia on this list is just 22nd, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It may not be a good thing. It may just be a thing that's true. But when you look at just some of Georgia's SEC competition, LSU is number 1 on this list. To cross-reference that with the CBS thing we're talking about, it's amazing. They got the number 1 overall transfer in Leavitt, one of the top 3 transfers in Jordan Seaton, and you can't go a couple of names down without finding another transfer that LSU brings in. They were very aggressive in the transfer portal. And some of you would say, well, that just shows you how desperate they were with Lane Kiffin being hired, and they're trying to, quickly change the program. That's true. They are desperate, but just because they're desperate doesn't mean it might not work. Texas, who obviously, felt the frustration of not making the playoff a year ago, spent huge dollars this offseason. They're number 4. Ole Miss, who had their entire program seemingly taken from them by LSU when Lane Kiffin was hired, guess what? They've worked very hard to replace those guys. They have, according to ESPN, the number 7 overall transfer class. Surprisingly, Kentucky, with their brand new coach Will Stein, have you seen how aggressive Kentucky's been? They're 8th. Texas A&M is 10th. Georgia opponents such as Auburn are 11th. South Carolina 21st. Tennessee in there at 20. And then Georgia coming in at 22. So this goes back to something we talked about the other day, which is I am very curious about the upcoming season. I'm always hopeful and optimistic about Georgia, but also curious to see for a Georgia program that's made a very big bet on the players that it's brought in out of high school, been developing over the last year, 2 years, in some cases 3 years, how well that works out in comparison to the smash and grab SEC teams like LSU, Texas, and Ole Miss that are trying to get every single transfer they can get. It is really interesting that when you start to see the list of top transfers come out, the list of top transfer classes come out, Georgia just has not dipped its toe in those waters as much as other programs are. And we'll see how much that works this upcoming fall. It could be that Georgia back on top as the national champion once again, and the envy of everybody in college football of, man, much like it was in 2022, by the way, man, they had this great success and they didn't have to go out and get a bunch of, rent-a-player mercenaries to make it happen. Or on the flip side, if a team like LSU, who is going to begin the year somewhere around like the top 15, but not top 5, if they lean on all these transfer additions, all of this big spending, and if they make a big move towards the top of the SEC and into the college football playoff, and if teams they're competing with in that western part of the league, like Ole Miss, Texas, if they do the same, then I do believe the writing might be on the wall for what college football looks like here right now. It is a clash of styles with Georgia against some of its SEC competition, and we'll get a chance to see this fall which of those two sides emerges as the winner. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We are glad you were with us today, no matter how you get to us live on video, 10 a.m., across all platforms there on that. Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 Rev, podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really, really glad to have you as a part of what we're doing here today. And a big thanks to our friends at Kroger, who make it all possible for you there as well. You're getting ready for the big game coming up in a couple of Sundays. Kroger's got you covered on all of that. They're calling themselves your halftime headquarters. Do you like that? That's what Kroger is right now. So when you want to get everything you need for the big game party, I'm talking about food and beverages and all of that. You know the drill. You've been doing this for a long time. You're making, what is it, like the 7-layer dip and all that kind of stuff. People love doing that around the big game coming up. Well, no better place to get stocked up than your local Kroger when it comes to all of that. In fact, you can check them out on the website, Kroger.com/football, and learn more about that today. That is Kroger.com/football, and learn more about that today. We love our friends at Kroger. We are thrilled to have them as a part of DawgNation Daily. So check them out as you're getting ready for the big game. And if you're getting ready for snow this weekend, I don't mean this jokingly, I mean this seriously. I was very thankful that our local Kroger last week, we wouldn't have had bread if not for Kroger. So thankful that they had that for us, and they've helped us keep stocked for a very long time. We love them. We appreciate them. Great supporters of ours here on DawgNation Daily. Super, super thankful for all of that. All right, it's great to have you with us here on a Friday. We have got Jeff Sentell coming up in a moment. The big story for Georgia today might be just the sheer number of elite recruits on their way to visits this weekend. I actually hope the weather doesn't mess all of this up, because it has a chance to be a really fun weekend with Georgia playing a big basketball game against Texas A&M, a bunch of recruits on hand. This is one of those really energized, busy weekends for Georgia if you can get the weather to cooperate with you. We'll see if it does, and Jeff Sentell will tell us more about that coming up in just a moment. Prior to that, though, let's go around the Doghouse, presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. And we're obviously in All-Star season. We had some coverage live from Mobile in the Senior Bowl this week. You also had the East-West Shrine Bowl taking place. You had a decent collection of Georgia guys at least going through those practices. Not all of them played in the game, but a decent number of those guys went through practice, including Georgia offensive lineman Micah Morris. And it sounds like, I don't know, I'm not really a draftnik necessarily, but it sounds like some of the scouts who were paying attention, it seems like they liked a little bit of what Morris was able to do. I'll show you this from one of our friends from over at Pro Football Focus, Trevor Sekema, who writes, the Georgia guard Micah Morris, powerful dude, neutralized the bull rush. He's evaluating some of the drills that were going on in practice. Neutralized the bull rush, then knocked the defensive lineman straight over with a shoulder to the side. There was also a funny video that came out of Morris doing some, sometimes they'll do this in all-star games where the offensive linemen have to catch the punts. That's a little bit, I guess, more of an outside the comfort zone for a guy like Morris. But these sorts of drills against defensive linemen, way more in Morris's comfort zone. And it sounds like one of our guys from Pro Football Focus thought that Morris was doing very well. It sounds like in terms of a pro football future, NFL future, it sounds like Morris took a big step towards them. By the way, when you look at guys that left Georgia off the 2024 roster, Dylan Fairchild, Jared Wilson, Tate Ratledge. These are guys that left Georgia and immediately stepped into a starting role in the NFL. So obviously Morris is going to have a chance to travel a similar path. And as Sycamore from Pro Football Focus points out, when it comes to what people will like about Morris as a player, it is just that sheer strength. It is just that sheer size. And in fact, the other day, we played a couple of clips from TikTok that a local reporter had gotten from some of the guys at the East-West Shrine Bowl. One of the guys he also caught up with was Micah Morris. And in talking about the strength that Morris put on display during the East-West Shrine Bowl week, Morris actually told what I thought was a pretty funny story about just how strong he is. That when you get to be a certain level of strength, the way that Micah Morris is, all of a sudden now, when you go into a weight room, even a weight room like Georgia's, you actually can't max out on the bench press. I thought this was really interesting. Micah Morris this week, we found this on TikTok. Take a listen to it.
What's the accurate number for the bench press, the squat number?
Well, at Georgia, we don't really max. We don't really max squat just because, honestly, the plates are there's not really enough room on the bar for all the plates that I could probably max out. But I would say it was in the high 6s, low 7s. I would say if I had to guess. And what's for bench press? What's 5 plates on these side? 495, 485. But I feel like I could push out 500 if I really.
Are you gonna do the bench at the combine?
Yeah, I might. If not, I'm gonna do it at the pro day. One of the two.
By the way, Trey Daubert was the guy on TikTok, and you should check him out. He's got a bunch of Georgia interviews, some other players. Pretty good stuff from Trey there on TikTok. Is that not funny, though, from Micah Morris, who's like, max out my squat? Well, actually, I can't do that because there's not enough room on the bar for all the plates that I can put on. Then he's having to do the math of, what is 5 plates on each side? How much is that? He's trying to, multiply that. That's how strong he is, to the point where maxing out is not even a physical and mathematical possibility just because you can't fit all the plates on the bar that he's using. I think that's really funny. And when you see that strength on full display, well, you're obviously very cued in on why the NFL scouts are going to like Morris so much, we probably think. And the other thing that Micah did with Trey Daubert, which we always like, is when the former player looks ahead to the future at Georgia and says, who's left over, who's going to step up, who's going to do some big things. And one of the handful of guys that Micah wanted to give some love to here are a couple of guys that did step up big as true freshmen a year ago. Dontrell Glover, who emerged as a starter. Juan Gaston, who emerged as a starter-level player. Micah Morris this week says he thinks there's more of the same coming from them in year 2 because of how they fit into this overall system. This is Micah Morris once again with Trey Daubert.
How about a young guy at Georgia, maybe up and coming in a couple of years, somebody that people should watch for that maybe they don't know about right now?
The
receiver said Jacoby White, but maybe somebody else.
I say Donnie Glover, offensive lineman, and Juan Gaston, because I was with them, so I know them. I mean, Donnie's a ball player, Juan's a ball player. I mean, we're going to fit right in with the mold for, big Georgia offensive linemen that dominate the trenches.
I think that's really good stuff from Micah Morris there. Let me say this to tie this topic to our topic off the top of the show, is that Georgia really has done very well with high school recruiting. Therefore, it thinks it doesn't need to go out and bring as many transfers as LSU is going to bring in or as Texas is going to bring in. That Georgia's just found the guys it's brought out of high school, which very well might work. It's working pretty well right now, and it might even still work to the tune of winning a national championship. It's certainly a possibility. But in order for that to be the case, and we're going to spend some time in the days to come talking more about this, at every level of the program, first year, second year, third year, fourth year, the transfers you bring in, those 5 categories of players on Georgia's team, you need guys to step up from each of those categories. Last year, from the first-year players, the incoming freshmen, Georgia had at least 2 guys that stepped up and became starter-level players. That's what Glover was. That's what Gaston was. And Micah Morris is showing some love right there. But when you also think about with now Morris being gone from Georgia, you look to a completely different category, probably from that category of rising juniors, guys from a very robust 2024 signing class. Whether it be Daniel Calhoun or Michael Weaney, one of those guys from that spot, they probably have to step up too. And while Morris says, man, the young guys are ready, I'm also thinking about some of those older guys, whether it be Weaney, whether it be Calhoun, I've always liked. One of those guys also has to step up and be, starter worthy for you as well, for your offensive line to be as good as it possibly can be. And it's really those building blocks that I think are going to determine how good Georgia can be for this upcoming season. With most of its roster being made of formerly homegrown players, how many of them can step up, including a couple of rising juniors? They're going to have their chance and their say to replace the very strong Micah Morris in the Georgia offensive line for 2026. And we'll make that Around the Doghouse, presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. Now, we love talking about the Georgia Bulldogs, but there's another kind of dog that we don't like talking about at all. It's the kind of dog that's not properly cared for, negligence on the part of the owner. All of a sudden, it gets free, it's off a leash, it's mass chaos, and we absolutely hate chaos in all forms. We are just not fans of that at all, of course. And when that happens, sometimes the animal bites someone, knocks someone over, creates injury, creates madness. And obviously, we think in situations like that, if you've been harmed, if you've been bitten, if you've been injured, someone you love, if that's the story for them, well, we think you deserve your chance to fight for compensation like any other personal injury situation, pain and suffering, medical bills, all the things associated with that. And our encouragement to you would be to reach out to the law firm that literally wrote the book on how to win these kinds of cases. When I say literally, I do mean literally. They wrote a book about their expertise in this particular area, and they want to put that expertise to work for you. So please, find them online. It's ZagoriaLaw.com, ZAGORIA, ZagoriaLaw.com, or give them a call, 833-GA-DOG-BITE. Dog spelled conventionally D-O-G, 833-GA-DOG-BITE. You can check out our friends at Zagoria Law. If you've got what can be sad and scary story of being attacked by a dog, injured by a dog, bitten by a dog, our friends at Zagoria Law want to provide you some help. So please find them today. Zagoria Law, bringing Around the Doghouse here to us. Okay, before we're done, big update on our Dawg Nation Cruise giveaway. You're going to want to know this. Your chance to talk some UGA recruiting with Jeff Sentell at sea in person. Somebody's going to be a big winner on all of that. We've also got some big news around the SEC today. We'll wish the Georgia basketball team luck as it gets ready to play a big one tomorrow. So we're still fully loaded before our show is done here on this Friday. But for now, on what is by all accounts, a gigantic weekend looming for Georgia, let's talk about that and more with Jeff Sentell here today. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Before I get into what's going to happen for Georgia here this weekend, let me bring in Jeff on the conversation we're just having. Interesting stuff from Micah Morris, obviously touting Dontrell Glover and Juan Gaston, 2 freshmen from a year ago that really stepped up and became starter-level players. And listen, I think in every signing class in this current day, especially when Georgia's going to lean on its own talent, its high school recruits so much, you got to have a couple of those starter-level players emerge each and every year. I think that as a guy we've talked about this week, Ekene Ogboko, there's a chance he could be that for Georgia. By ranking, he probably should be. He was Georgia's 5-star as listed by Rivals here this week. Are there other potential starter level players, Jeff, that you do think could come out of this 2026 class this year, much the same way Donnie Glover and Juan Gaston would have been able to do for Georgia a year ago?
Brandon, good morning. Good topic. The first name that comes to my mind is a guy that I hold in the same regard as I did Dontrell Glover when I knew he would show up in May and still make waves up the Georgia depth chart, and that's Zakai Helton, the young man out of Carrollton, two-way player. His evaluation was so strong that some people thought maybe Travion Scott should claim him and let him be a defensive lineman and not just an offensive lineman type, center type, guard type for the Dogs. I think Zakai is a guy that can, really play right away, or at least make some waves to play right away. And I think Ekene is going to have to be thrust into that two deep. I think he can hold down a right tackle at times and reach that starter level, like you said, at the same threshold that Juan Gaston did. And that's very rare to do that with those grown man trenches, Brandon. I'll tell you what Micah's soundbite made me think of, and it's just the reality of our world today, Brandon. I remember Micah Morris came in 2021 at the peak of the Georgia depth chart when it looked like Everest about how tall Georgia's depth charts were. Micah Morris, pretty capable player, near five-star level player coming out of Camden County, and he had to wait along with Jared Wilson and Dylan Fairchild some 2 or 3 years before they got to play. And then you see how things are a lot different now, where Dontrell and Juan Gaston can get in right away. Part of that is because those young men are so talented and so ready for the college level. We're so ready for the college level. But the other part of it is just simply Georgia doesn't have the dudes stacked up at every position anymore.
I think that's an interesting contrast to something else I just mentioned. You've talked a lot about, boy, it seems like Georgia's not getting as much out of its 2023 class as you'd maybe like for it to get. But the following year, the 2024 class on paper still looks really good. Georgia's had players from that group mostly stick around. They've stepped up, and they have a chance this upcoming season for even more of those now third-year players to have their moment. So if Micah Morris was a player that waited for a while and got his chance to finally show what he's all about, then I think if you're a Georgia fan, you're hopeful that a couple of guys from that 24 class, whether it be Daniel Calhoun or Michael Weenie, that one of those guys can become and emerge a starter level at guard. Because if you've got either Weenie or Calhoun, maybe both, to go along with Glover, Gaston, the return of Ernest Green, when fully healthy, Drew Bobo, and what you hope Ekene Ogboko might be, Jeff, that might be about as much offensive line depth that you can ask for. It really might be in this current age. But you do need either Calhoun or Weenie, two former elite recruits that you once covered. You do need at least one of those guys to really emerge to get the, the top-end performance from the offensive line that might be projected.
Correct, Brandon. That's about as good as you could ask for in the year 2026 of our Lord to have that type of ability. And, it's kind of interesting. Georgia just figured it out with that 2024 class, whether it was the language of the NIL deals or how they re-upped them quickly when they were on campus, and maybe they included buyouts and things like that. But the ones that have stayed around, in contrast to the 2023 class when everybody was still trying to figure this stuff out, is pretty telling. And then you see guys like, maybe a Jamal Merriweather that decides it's time to go, Bo Hughley, it's time to go. Those guys were probably where Michael Weenie or, where Daniel Calhoun are right now, is they're going to give it one more year at Georgia, their third season at Georgia, to see if they can really stick and germinate. And, one thing I want to come back to, Brandon, is I was racking my brain about other Georgia starter level players in this freshman class. Brandon, I think it's more, the odds are very high that one of those safeties Georgia signed, they went crazy in the paint at safety this year, Brandon. And I truly believe that one of those safeties, whether it's Zachariah Ford or Jordan Smith or, obviously Ty Boogie Green, who we talk about a lot on our platforms, I think one of those guys is going to rise to that Rayshawn Dinkins level at Georgia really quickly. I remember Kirby Smart telling Jeremy Edwards, the Houston County coach last year, and I don't think it was just recruit speak and, keeping pipeline programs warm, is he was talking about Jordan Smith because he's a true combo safety, size, speed, great ability. And Kirby Smart was kind of kind of wishing and pining that he had one of those body types right now because he thought they could use a guy like Jordan Smith and his skill set last season for the Bulldogs.
That's really interesting. I want to ask you about this upcoming recruiting weekend for Georgia because it shapes up to be a big one. But I'll also tell people, too, that every Friday here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, Jeff and I have a great time talking UGA recruiting. It's always a lot of fun to do. And on our DawgNation cruise each April, a lot of folks get their chance to do just what I'm doing right now, just pitching Jeff some recruiting questions, hearing what he has to say. It's one of our special events. We've been thrilled to do this for the last 5 years. And one of the things that's also been a cool part of this, too, is our friends at Kroger do a DawgNation cruise getaway. Now, we're on Utopia of the Seas again this year, which is a wonderful ship. We're leaving out on April the 20th. We are sailing April 20th through the 24th. You go to Nassau in the Bahamas. You go to a wonderful private island. You have an incredible experience with that. It's just awesome, and we want you to get your chance to be a part of it. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to go to DawgNation.com/contests. That's DawgNation.com/contest, and you can just register for your chance to win. If you want to find out about the rules and regulations, because of course there are some of those, you can find that there too. And we're also going to just simply ask you, tell us your favorite moment. We got 10 years of Kirby Smart at Georgia. Tell us about your favorite moment from Smart over the course of that 10-year period. Just a fun way to make the giveaway a little bit more fun. You can give us your answer for that, and you'll be entered for your chance to win. We're going to give it away to somebody here very soon. You got now between now and February 13th to get involved on this. So you want to act fast to get your chance here. Can't wait to see you for our DawgNation Cruise giveaway. Best of luck to you on that. Register for your chance online, DawgNation.com/contest for more on that. That is DawgNation.com/contest. Can't wait to see you for more on that today. Really looking forward to that DawgNation Cruise coming up in April, and hoping somebody's going to be a big winner here, courtesy of our friends at Kroger. Make sure you go to DawgNation.com/contest for your chance to win on that. All right, Jeff, shifting gears here for a moment. Big weekend coming up for Georgia, and hopefully like the snow and whatnot doesn't completely ruin all this, but looking at what looks to be a very impressive group of visitors coming in for Georgia. Biggest names in the class of 2027 for the most part. I think the quarterback commit, Jaden Wade, 2028, at least for now. He is, I think, a part of this there too. Got a nice list here on DawgNation.com. Obviously, the 5-star running back, Keeman Spell, and so much more. So, Jeff, the floor is yours. This feels like almost like one of these throwback days to when you just brought in all the big heavy artillery in one big weekend. Some of the stuff like you do in like May and June, doing this here for a junior day now at the very end of January turning to February. How about this big recruiting weekend for Georgia? What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, Brandon, first of all, you got to remember, this is the last time you'll have face-to-face recruiting coaches, families, players, prospects for a month. This is it. And this is very important real estate for Georgia to get these guys when every other school in the country wants to get these guys on campus as well. You're right that it does feel like maybe a scavenger hunt weekend, but, you know, I say this a lot, even on our Before the Hedges program, Brandon, is that this is a seeds weekend, and it may turn out to be a snow globe weekend in Athens. But what Georgia tries to do is plant seeds with these young men in their interests so it germinates into an official visit in June. And that's a lot of these young men will come out of this weekend saying, all right, Georgia's getting one, or Georgia's probably not getting one. And that will usually get locked in this weekend in terms of them setting their dates. That's already happening right now. And Brandon, I think what's different about the one 2 weeks ago is those were guys that Georgia was going to say, hey, we love you. The recruiting rankings might not love you yet. The offers might not love you yet, but we love you. You might have no stars. You might not have an SEC offer, but bang, here's the Georgia offer, where they were trying to be the first through the door. Now with this one, Brandon, this is the Hog Molly heavyweight weekend, and I think we need to start with, and it is just what it is, Brandon. The number one running back in the country, Kamon Spell, is in Athens this weekend. Now, he told reporters about 2 weeks ago that Georgia was his leader, and then roughly not even 24 hours later, he was crystal balled by a lot of people in the industry insiders to return to his commitment to Penn State. He was a Penn State commitment before James Franklin was fired, then he opened things up. Here's what I believe with Spell, Brandon, and it is just what it is, and it is a fascinating conversation. sooner or later, Georgia is going to have to pay considerable coin for a running back. I just think it is inevitable. You're going to see next year, I believe, Chauncey Bowens, at least Nate Frazier will move on to the NFL. If not now, then when? Because I do believe Kamon Spell would love to go to Georgia, all things being equal, Brandon. But as you and I well know, all things in the compensation category are not equal yet. And it might be a matter of Georgia having to get real close to his number, not just ballpark, to win the recruitment of the nation's number one running back.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that, and I can't remember if you and I have talked about this, but I've certainly done this as a topic on the show, is that as college football becomes what appears to be more and more professionalized, people make the comparison to the NFL. But the one way in which college football continues to be different from the NFL is, while in the NFL, running back is that spot where a lot of organizations try to go on the cheap. They try to use rookie wage scale, late round draft picks, use a guy up, and then go get a cheap replacement. In college football, we're not necessarily seeing that. For instance, Georgia Tech, allegedly spent very big to bring in Justice Haynes. Penn State a year ago spent very big on, both of its running backs. Missouri holds on to its guy, spent big to do that. There's a lot of big spending going on right now at the running back position. And I do think it is a reminder that no matter what the NFL does with its running backs, in college football, for various reasons, that position still has more value, almost like it would have back when we were kids. There is still an extra value placed on the running back position in college that might not be true in the NFL.
I feel like that's the case, Brandon. I feel like what happens is running backs, first of all, they realize that they only have a shelf life of carries of maybe 3,000, 4,000 carries in their career. And the chances of them getting to that second big NFL contract, the one after the rookie deal, are very slim. That's a position that usually churns out of the NFL by 28, 29, 30 years of age now. And I think they realize they got to get the money. And Brandon, especially in their college years, and I have every confidence in saying that the winning team that gets and signs Kamon Spell, great talent. He doesn't have a lot of film about catching the football. He doesn't run in a pro-style offense in high school, but he's shown he can do that at prospect camps. He's shown that at 7-on-7 camps earlier this year. But the winning bid for him is going to be over probably 1.1, 1.25 billion per season. I'm going to say this, and I'm not going to jump up on the table too loud, but when you see Georgia, last couple of teams lacking depth at the running back position, when Etienne went down, when Frazier went down, and you've got to win that Sugar Bowl, it would be nice to turn to perhaps a DeAndre Swift type like they did even in that 2017 season, or even in 2020 and 2021 when they turned to Zamir White and they turned to Kenny McIntosh and they turned to James Cook. They need to have that rotation of backs with NFL second-round, third-round pick guys. And the other thing, Brandon, it's a fascinating discussion. You're going to either pay him in high school or you're going to have to pay him out of the portal, or you're going to have to pay him to retain him. One way or another, you're going to have to pay him.
And listen, I'll tell you right now, this showed up on the field for Georgia a year ago. As the season progressed, we saw Nate Frazier and at times Chauncey Bowens get better when it comes to eluding tacklers, in some cases running away from tacklers. But at the beginning of the season, I just don't know that Georgia had that. It's one of the reasons why we saw, I think, Dwight Phillips playing more at the beginning of the year and probably saw less of him as the season went along, is because while Phillips is not very big, he is elusive. He does have speed. He can just run away from tacklers. And, I think there was a lot of running into tacklers for Georgia, the running back position, as the year began. It got better as the year went on. But this is part of what you pay for at running back, the kind of player that can just make tacklers miss. And with all due respect, I don't know how much of that Georgia's had at the running back position the last couple of years.
Brandon, let's be real here. Tell me this, in your honesty compels you to admit voice.
Jeff, you may have dropped out on me. You said when was the what?
When was the last time Georgia had a running back in the backfield that could scare defensive coordinators? And the definition here is a guy that can take a 7-yard play and make it a 70-yard play.
I think it's DeAndre Swift. And listen, I'm very happy with the guys they've had since then. I think that maybe James Cook could have been that. He's obviously leading rusher in the NFL now. He was used a little bit different at Georgia. But in terms of the game plan that you're describing, I mean, it's probably not been since DeAndre Swift for me. It's been mostly ensemble cast since then, but it's not really been the big explosive runs since Swift left.
Yeah, and it just makes it easier, Brandon. There's so much talk about the extended handoff and the box numbers say this. So you throw a screen out to Zachariah Branch, and that's, that extension of the run game, because it's so much easier, Brandon, to throw a 5-yard pass and get 14 yards than it is to throw a 20-yard pass and get that same amount of yards. So, it's one of those things where if you've just got a guy back there that is an exclamation point, a damage dealer, it just makes it so much easier. You see right now, Georgia has a 3-star running back committed in the class. Last year, they signed, Bo Walker, a 3-star running back in 2025. Last year was Jay Lamar, a 4-star with a lot of ability, but was still around the number 10, 12, 15 running back in the class. It's one of those things, Brandon. It's a discussion from here on in about, will Georgia, eventually throw some finances at the running back position to get one of those special running backs, or will they rather stack other positions like linebacker, defensive line, offensive tackle, and things like that? It is a very finite space now with money, but maybe there's a day where Georgia spends big on one guy and he is their guy for multiple seasons. The running back position, Brandon, they're designed to wear down in such a tough league like the SEC. But when we start playing these 9 conference games, Brandon, I think you're going to need more depth at the running back position than ever.
All right, let me follow up on one thing on this, then I'll let you go and get your weekend going here. In all fairness on this particular topic, when Todd Monken got here in 2020, Georgia did start throwing the ball more. The numbers bear that out. And people joke about, Georgia wide receivers blocking. It's really the point at which they started throwing it more that the explosive runs went away. You go back and watch, the game that always comes to mind for me is DeAndre Swift in 2018 against Kentucky. It was a very big game. The SEC East was on the line that day. And DeAndre had some explosive runs, and some of what enabled those runs to take place was very good blocking down the field. And I'm not saying the Georgia receivers can't block anymore, but they do throw it more now. And I do think that Georgia is pitching a little bit of a different type of thing to its wide receivers now, because that's what some people have said they want Georgia to do. But there is no free lunch in life. And as Georgia's become a little bit more of a prolific passing attack, receivers are probably blocking less than they were in, say, 2017, 2018, 2019. And it may not be a coincidence that we're not seeing the 20-plus yard runs from Georgia running backs quite as much since Georgia has started throwing the ball a bit more.
Can't have it everywhere. I mean, again, Georgia, Colby Young, Brandon, I thought he was the guy that made a difference for Georgia, because he was not only a dedicated and willing blocker, he was a plus blocker in the run game. And I think that's why he was so hard to bring down when he did touch the ball on some of those screens. And, it's hard to have it all. You want that explosive receiver that can turn a hitch or turn a screen into an explosive play, 20-plus yards. But at the same time, you also need that guy on the perimeter to turn a lot of those 7-8 yard gains into 20-yard gains. And it's just kind of what it is. It is a very rob from Peter to pay Paul type thing there when you're talking about specific athletes at wide receiver. I know one of them that's in town today, Brandon, Amari A.P. Patterson, who lives off the word yak. He's a guy that doesn't mind mixing it up. And when you can get a speed guy that Georgia's comparing to a Zachariah Branch in the recruiting pitch, at the very least, when he's 6'1" and 200 pounds and he's running that 10.7 and he's clocked 23 on the Catapult GPS vest, I think that is the best of both worlds.
Yeah, really interesting stuff, Jeff. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll look forward to all your coverage of Georgia, massive junior day, major prospects on campus. We'll look forward to that, and we'll catch you very soon once again here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
Hey, man, Brandon, appreciate you, man. I hope we get big pictures of the snowmen in around Athens this weekend, man.
We'll see if that's the case, Jeff. Great stuff. Thanks a lot.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a great throwback weekend. I think the average fan says, recruiting doesn't mean what it once meant. Well, a place like Georgia, it still can. And with guys like this coming in this weekend, you better believe that has a chance to be true. Major recruits on hand Good stuff from Jeff Sentell on that. They had more on this past week on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, too. That is a lot of fun. We're going to get ready for an SEC through here in a moment. Before we do that, though, let me give a shout-out to our friends at Retro Roofers. Man, I tell you this, I love the fact that for something that's so important for so many people, the roof over your head, literally, the fact that we have such a great recommendation we're able to make here at DawgNation when it comes to that. DawgNation Daily, proud to tell you about our friends at Retro Roofers when it comes to your roof replacement needs. Because here's the thing, and our folks at Retro Roofers will be glad to tell you this, that this is just a bit of an interesting industry in that a lot of people say they're roofers. They knock on your door, hey, I'm a roofer. Would you like a great deal on a roof replacement? But sometimes this stuff that sounds too good to be true actually turns out to be too good to be true. And that's why our friends at Retro Roofers, who do it the right way and have been doing that for a very long time, they're really in search of the credentialing and the certification that really any great industry should have. That's what Retro Roofers is all about, because they want people to know that they are doing quality work that they are proud to stand by for many years to come. That's one of the reasons why they've been recognized as members of the GAF President's Club. Now, if you don't know a lot about roofing, that may not mean as much to you, but GAF is the maker of the kinds of architectural shingles that Retro Roofers uses. And for the thousands of roofing companies that GAF works with, they recognize like 19 of these out of the 3,000 in total as their GAF President's Club, which is a special designation for those roofing companies that are going above and beyond. And that is what our friends at Retro Roofers are doing all the time. They are GAF fortified certified. It is a rare category indeed. That's what they're all about. So when it's time to talk about, my roof not looking great, I've got some leaks, I've got some stuff going on, online, retroroofers.com, RETRO, retroroofers.com for more on that today. Okay, let's do an SEC through. Interesting story. And on 3 today, Brett McMurphy is the writer about the ongoing battle between the SEC and the Big Ten when it relates to college football playoff expansion. We know enough about this to know SEC favors an expansion to 16, Big Ten wants an expansion to 24. What McMurphy did in his story was talk to some folks outside the SEC and the Big Ten, frustration with these two leagues about the fact that they've got all this power. This is the synopsis of the story that McMurphy writes. They've got all this power. They've got total control over college athletics, but they can't come together for enough of an agreement to actually make a move towards the future of the college football playoff, which I would say is a bit of an interesting way to frame this story. Because when I read Brett McMurphy's story, here's what I find out. Yes, the SEC seemingly really are at each other's throats with the Big Ten over should it be a 16-team playoff and a 24-team playoff? Should there be automatic qualifiers? Should there be all these things? But what you find out is that while the SEC and the Big Ten are at odds over this and seemingly at a never-ending stalemate, every other conference, plus Notre Dame to the extent they matter, they seem to all align with the SEC's thinking. So to me, it is a very interesting framing of a story that, SEC, Big Ten, never-ending stalemate. It almost seems like, to me, a better frame of the same information is everybody in college ball wants one thing except for the Big Ten, which wants something completely different. And boy, that to me is becoming more and more of a thing. And I do think, I've been telling you for a while, I know that the transfer portal in NIL is uncomfortable, but I don't think it's the kind of thing you necessarily need to be afraid of. When you look at the way the sport's still thriving, I don't think you need to be afraid of it. I do think you need to be a little bit afraid of a 24-team playoff. I do think that level of playoff expansion, especially if it comes with automatic qualifiers, all of a sudden now a lot of regular season games that used to mean something, well, now they don't really mean anything anymore when essentially the entire top 25 makes the playoff almost. It just doesn't quite mean what it used to mean. This is a huge problem, and this is very much what the Big Ten wants. And right now they're the only league that wants it, but we have to admit, they're also the top league. And this is why, I said this yesterday, if you want to have control over the direction that college football is moving, the direction that college athletics is moving, you got to lead from the front. You got to lead from on top. And we need Georgia to get back on top. If we want to prevent what I think would be a very bad thing, 24-team playoff, nobody else in college athletics wants it except for the Big Ten. If we want to prevent that kind of thing from happening, you got to have what's supposed to be the standard bearer for the SEC, Georgia, you got to have them back on top. You have to have the full amplified volume of Kirby Smart's voice. When you're not the top program, the number one ranked team, when you're not the one winning the national championship, when your league isn't dominating the sport, you just don't have quite as loud a voice as you once did. Right now, the Big Ten has a slightly louder voice. So let's watch this and see. They're the only league, according to McMurphy's own reporting, they're really the only league that wants the 2014 playoff. Do we end up still getting that? I think that gives you an idea of how much power the Big Ten's accrued for itself. This is worth watching here. It's being said, SEC and the Big Ten, they're at odds with each other. But the truth is, while they are legitimately at odds, everybody else seems to be siding with the SEC. But the Big Ten has got the prestige of the last 3 national championships and a league that stretches across all 4 time zones. They have aggressively sought to become a much bigger league. With that size comes power, and it seems like the Big Ten wants to use it. We'll see if the SEC is capable of stopping them. Let me also shift to this. Hollywood Smothers is a running back that was supposed to transfer to Alabama. He has instead decided to go to Texas. Speaking of On 3, they did a pretty interesting deep dive into what went into Smothers leaving Bama's class and going to be a part of the portal class for Texas. This is a very big ad for Texas. We don't know that Texas necessarily took care of its offensive line situation as well as it could, but man, it really did a good job of bringing in skill talent like this. They've clearly tried to upgrade at running back. Smothers is an example of that. In telling his story, one of the things that Smothers also said that got some people's attention is that he thought that Texas was just more committed to winning than Alabama was. Now, there is an addendum and a caveat to this that needs to be mentioned is even in this day and age in which NIL is obviously the most powerful element within the sport, players are still very slow to acknowledge the role that NIL makes in their decision because, and I think they're probably right about this, it just puts a very big spotlight on them and it creates this situation where they can be more easily criticized. We've seen a lot of examples of that. So I don't necessarily fault players for concealing the role that NIL plays in their decisions. Obviously, Smothers decides not to go to Alabama and goes to Texas instead because Texas was giving him more money. I do understand why he wants to not say it that way, though, because nothing seems to be good coming from that. However, and this is one of the things I've seen some fans talking about online, and I have to admit I think it's true too, we live in interesting times when suddenly Alabama's commitment to winning can be questioned. Obviously, in the Nick Saban era, that was never true. And, of course, this past year, Alabama still made the college football playoff, and it beat Georgia once. So we haven't seen complete and total program collapse from Alabama. That's obviously true. But let's watch a lot of these preseason rankings. Way too early top 25s. We don't see Alabama as a top 10 team right now. Replacement at quarterback for Ty Simpson. They've obviously got, talented players in the roster like Austin Mack and Keelan Russell, but that's a bit of an unknown right now. A year ago, all of the top player lists would have seen a lot of Alabama players up near the top. Tim Keenan, LT Overton, and on you want to go. Probably a little less of that here right now for Alabama as we move towards 2026. So when the running back that leaves Bama to go to Texas says, Texas is more committed to winning, I don't necessarily take that at face value, but it is becoming a little easier to question how set up to win is Alabama really. This is about to be a fascinating season for the Crimson Tide because one of the things that we'll get into, we'll do more of this, is that the epicenter of the SEC right now appears to be moving. And this is not a slight against Georgia, but the epicenter of the SEC is not what we commonly think of as the SEC. It's not the teams that Georgia mostly plays. It's not Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama. It's just not. The epicenter of the SEC right now, listen, just look at any of the online content that's out there. The epicenter of the SEC is moving very far west. It's LSU, Texas, Texas A&M, maybe Oklahoma, certainly probably they're hopeful still Ole Miss, who was a part of the national semifinals this year. And listen to what I'm telling you. I'm not saying those are the best teams in the SEC. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying those are the SEC teams that are making the most noise. That our version of Heritage SEC, which includes Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, the team that Georgia's viewed as its arch nemesis. If you look at all the stories being generated by those teams and compare it to all the stories being generated by LSU, Ole Miss, Texas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, you just see a very different news cycle playing out in these different sections of the SEC right now. So it's worth following that to see where it goes. Running back leaves Bama, goes to Texas, say they're just more committed to winning. We obviously equate that with spending. And it does seem like the westernmost zone in the SEC is doing a lot more spending here right now. Well, we'll see what that means for the action on the field later this fall. And a sad note to close this out. It has been reported that the legendary former Notre Dame coach, also coach in the SEC at Arkansas and South Carolina, ESPN analyst Lou Holtz has been put into hospice care, which obviously suggests that he may be near the end of his life. And I think that's incredibly sad. Holtz is obviously a legendary coach and a gigantic figure in college football. We've even had some fun with Coach Holtz in the last couple of years because of the war of words he had going on with Ryan Day. And we thought that Coach Holtz held his own very well in all of that, even though it felt like Ohio State got the last laugh because Ohio State beat Notre Dame. Still, we thought that Lou Holtz pushed all the right buttons and all that. And the fact that he got Ryan Day as worked up as he did, I thought it was really entertaining. So even in the last couple of years, Holtz has actually been a pretty big character on this show based on that. He obviously was the last coach to win a national championship at Notre Dame, and he loved the Fighting Irish, always has. And the thing that I'll also remember about Lou Holtz here too is that he was a huge part of something that doesn't seem to exist as much anymore. ESPN College Game Day is still a really big deal. It's obviously gone through some changes. Now it's Nick Saban, now it's Pat McAfee. But even with some cast changes, that broadcast window, that show remains a really big deal. But for a lot of us, I'm 40 whatever now, when I was in my 20s, it was the late night version of ESPN where for a long time, like at one point it was Trev Alberts, who's now an athletic director. Then it was Mark May working with Lou Holtz. This was and I don't quite know what the ratings were, but this was a huge piece of football real estate where everybody I knew was watching this ESPN late night show. They're getting the highlights, they're getting the reaction. That's a very big deal. I think for the most part, and this may be one of the few times in life I've ever been at the forefront of anything, we started doing our DawgNation postgame show in 2016. And over the course of the time that we've been doing our postgame show, you see almost all the YouTube guys. They're doing some sort of postgame content. YouTube is just, and a lot of people do a very good job with this, YouTube is just filled up with post-game college football content, going live right when the game is over. Everybody's reacting. I mean, there are literally a million of those shows. And I guess this just may be one of those things that the internet took from ESPN, that ESPN used to have a monopoly on the late-night college football conversation. And whether it be someone like me talking specifically about Georgia or some other podcaster talking about whatever the game of the night might be, something about that in the moment, a little bit more casual, off-the-cuff reaction just took off. And this is one of those things, I think the internet just took this from ESPN. And so if you're in your 20s now, it's probably hard to imagine how big of a deal this used to be. The late night highlight show, Mark May, Lou Holtz, to be honest with you, never all that fully informed with their opinions, but still just shooting from the hip. There was some fun stuff during that time. And so I probably think of Holtz more as a broadcaster than I do as a coach, because I was really young when he was coach at Notre Dame, and he obviously wasn't quite as successful at South Carolina as he would have been at previous stops. But he was a huge part of my life during that time. He was also, if you're about my age, it seems like he did a lot of motivational speaking around, the time I was a teenager. You go to these, I don't know if it's like an FCA camp or something like that. It just feels like there were multiple moments where I was somewhere where Lou Holtz was like the motivational speaker. He did a lot of that kind of thing back then. So this was one of those famous people that I think you almost felt like you knew because you'd seen him, do these speeches and things like that. Towering figure in the sport overall, and obviously it sounds like he's fallen into some bad health. He's 89 years old. He's obviously lived a rich and full life. But obviously our prayers going to Coach Holtz and his family here at what sounds like are some challenging health times for him. And on that somber note, we'll make that your SEC through. And as we get ready to wrap it up here today, obviously we're hoping for good weather in Athens tomorrow. We may not get it, but we are hopeful for it. As Jeff said, a lot of recruiting going on with that, and also a chance for the Georgia basketball team once again. Came up a little short against Tennessee on Wednesday. I thought the crowd was great during the game. And, man, the Saturday crowds are usually up a notch, usually a little extra. So to those Georgia students who do a great job packing it out, the UGA basketball official account showed some love to them the other day. We will show some love to them there too. I think the Georgia students have done a great job with the home court advantage this year. And frankly, I think this is something that UGA also does a good job with too, because they do a lot of student giveaways and things like that. They've actually put some money into the enticement to get the fans in the stands. I think that kind of stuff really works. Georgia's had a good home court advantage. Now we need the team itself to step up and play well in front of that home crowd. Big one against Texas A&M tomorrow. We'll give everybody associated with Georgia basketball a golden shoe in anticipation of what we hope is a big win against the Aggies. And lousy stinking Gators. A lot of news being made around a lot of SEC teams. Florida, not so much. Florida pretty stale here at the moment. How about 1,910 days, 1910. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is your Gator Hater Updater. Hope all of you have a great day. And we'll look forward to seeing you back here Monday. DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. Now, if it snows, we may be at home again, but we'll do our best one way or another. DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. Have a great weekend, everybody. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. I am reminded, Gator Hater Updater, when we got to 1776, we did the whole, American Revolution theme. We had a good time with all of that. That was fun. 1910, do I have this right? That's when the Titanic sank, right? 1910 was the Titanic sinking. Do I have that right? I feel like that was the Titanic year. So maybe we could have done a Titanic theme around all of that too. Either way. So I will tell you this, total confession. I did briefly preview this yesterday. We're going to get off very early today because I've got to get to a little business, got some business to take care of. Around here, we are in business to do business. So we're going to take care of some of that business and be very short with comments. And I mean very short. And then hopefully Monday, be able to do a little more of that. So checking in over here at Facebook to begin with, if I can. Never an easy thing. All right, let's see if we can get this to show up here on Facebook. Hold on one second, y'all. All right, on Facebook, here we go. Now we got it. On Facebook, Bill Sanders says the Titanic was actually 1912. So why do I have 1910 in my head? 1912 was the Titanic. There you go. To this day, still an amazing story. Like if you really dive into like the Titanic story, still to this day, still pretty amazing. And obviously an iconic movie, but the actual real story beyond just the the Jack and Rose thing is a pretty amazing story. All right. Yeah, Jim Blair also says 1912. Sorry about that. Let's see what else. Sounds like I'm mostly battling this troll guy over here. Ken Holcomb says, good show, BA. Have a great weekend. Ken, I appreciate that. Hope you have a great weekend, too. And I am legitimately sorry for the shorter chat today for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. But every now and then, I got to take care of some business. And today's one of those days. Dennis Wilson says, don't go, BA. I'm just getting started with this dog pound comment section. Would y'all agree that with as trolls go, Dennis is not quite so bad? Would y'all agree with that? That Dennis is obviously in here specifically trolling, but as trolls go, Dennis is not quite so bad. I don't think so anyway. Dean Alley says, which Titanic story am I diving into? I mean, there's all kinds of interesting stuff on that. First of all, and this is not the purpose of the show, but there really was sort of a, chivalrous quality to all that, right? I mean, it's like the men step back and let the women and children have the lifeboats. Of course, they were only half filled, but still, it wasn't the most efficient process, but there was a chivalry there that I do think is admirable. All right, so Wyatt Fielden says, just got put out. The game is still on for tomorrow, 1 p.m. for Georgia and Texas A&M. So hopefully that's good. So Can somebody in one sentence tell me what the weather's supposed to be in and around the Athens area? In one sentence, can that be summed up? Lysol operators I think it's about Dennis says he disappeared for years though. I wonder why. That's kind of what I think is funny about Dennis. You know how like you went to college with your friend and you don't see him for a few years, but then when you see him again, you just pick right up where you left off. There's an element with Dennis, our Miami fan, who will not show up for like 2 years. But then when he comes back in, he shows up as if he was here yesterday. I do find that to be endearing. I do. Foster Moss says, every time you and Mike talk about basketball, the team goes into Titanic mode. Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, listen, they lose because they lose. They don't lose because I talk about them. They lose because they lose. But we want to be able to, Mike probably goes a little farther with it than I want to. This is still a football show, of course. We've got bills to pay. But we want to reserve the right to be able to talk about the team a little bit. So Lysol operator says snow maybe 4 inches, but they don't really know. Yeah, it seems like, and this is a totally knee-jerk reaction. It seems like snow is more difficult to predict than ice. Can we agree on that? Does that seem true? It seems like that might be true. Bo Molinari says he does that too. Yeah. So Bo is a little bit like G. Grace. So a lot of y'all wonder, like, how did G. Grace get into our life, and why do I call him G. Grace, given the fact that's not what his username is on the on YouTube. So if you want to go back, it's almost 10 years ago now when we had SEC Country Live, which was a show in the afternoons. My good friend Mike Johnson, he and I would do it together. And we would just get in there and stir it up around SEC. This was like early days. Like we predated so many of these, SEC type shows that exist now. We predated all of these. As I said before, there aren't very many things in life that I'm ever going to be at the forefront of. But I was at the forefront of a lot of this kind of thing. Now I'm still sitting in the same chair I was 10 years ago, so what's it really worth? I don't know. But I was an early adopter to some of this streaming video, podcast type stuff. We were actually in pretty early on some of that. We used to have a great time. And some of our SEC country friends, Bo, Texas A&M, G. Grace, Alabama, others throughout the years, they have been a part of DawgNation Daily because of that, which I'm very happy. By the way, Stick D says, and he's in Nassau right now, he says the weather in Nassau and Jamaica going to be 70 and 80 degrees. He's leaving this weekend to go there. I'm telling you right now, y'all, that's why you want to go to the Caribbean during the winter. It's a great time to go. It's not an ad. It's just a great time to go. It's really, really nice in the wintertime. I am so jealous of Richard. I wish I was there. I wish I was there. Let me go to DawgNation.com for a minute. See how they are doing. And then after that, we really will have to wrap it up. All right. At DawgNation.com for a couple of moments. Seeing how people are doing. Yeah, Richard also put at DawgNation.com, weather nice in Nassau. And for those of you going on our DawgNation cruise, there have been some interesting upgrades in Nassau here too, which I think is going to be a very interesting experience. Randy Hall complimenting me on my outfit today. I appreciate that. My general rule is, if I've got, business meetings to attend, things like that, I try to throw in some clean clothes. So that's the story here today. But thank you for noticing. Matt Rukavina says, regarding that Texas trash talker on Facebook, all you got to do is remind them we made their quarterback cry. He's out of ammo after that. It's a very good point. Yeah. And listen, if it is a Texas fan who's talking trash, I would suggest that Texas, I'm sure, has plenty of programs they could talk trash against. You really got to work hard, and you've really got to suspend disbelief to talk trash against Georgia. You really do. I mean, at that point, it's almost like a Florida thing. And it's always been funny to me about Florida is I don't care how bad Georgia beats Florida, how many times Georgia beats Florida. There are still some Florida fans who just act like they don't know. They act like they don't care, just completely disconnected from facts, are just ripping into Georgia all the time. It's almost funny because it's so, desperate. The Texas fan has put himself basically in the same position where if you want to talk bad about Georgia, you have to invent a reality to be able to do so with. All right. A little bit of a reconsideration of Lou Holtz's coaching tenure in here right now. How about this? This is this is why I love our chat here. This is outstanding from Jeremy Smith. So Jeremy Smith says the Titanic sank 5 days before Fenway Park opened. Is that not amazing? I don't know why that seems so interesting to me, but it does. Fenway Park was a brand new stadium when the Titanic sank. And the fact that Fenway Park is still going strong gives you an idea of how venerable that building is. That's the kind of thing that I just find to be fascinating. So very good stuff, Jeremy. I appreciate that. And with that, we're going to get ready to wrap it up. Dogs Only says, I hope it's cooler in your studio today. Looks like you dressed lighter. I did dress a little lighter, and it is a little bit cooler in here today. Now, I did the same thing today that I did yesterday. I did not operate the thermostat any differently today than I did yesterday, and yet somehow it is a little cooler. And I know it seems pretentious and melodramatic. I really was lightheaded during the show yesterday. It was so hot in here because I don't normally wear, normally if I have my pullover on, I have a short sleeve shirt underneath the pullover. Yesterday I had the full button up underneath the sweatshirt, and I think it's just an extra layer. And I was getting woozy. I was getting woozy for sure. So there you go. All right, we're going to go. Appreciate all of that. Longer comments, hopefully on Monday, maybe from home. We'll have to see. I really don't know. I am not an expert at following the weather. But either way, y'all have a great weekend. Check out R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com. With cold weather seemingly sticking around for a while, great time to get your heating system tuned back up to factory fresh specs. R.S. Andrews can show you how. And it may only cost you $99, which is a lot cheaper than a brand new unit. So check out R.S. Andrews today online at rsandrews.com. You'll have a great day. In some form or fashion, we'll be back Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to talking to you then.